welcome to the live show. It's Q&A time, and I must say it's been quite a few weeks since I saw you last because I've been off for a few weeks, so it's really good to be back. And I want you to welcome first of all, my co-host, who's Mark Cabby, as you affectionately call him.
Evening, H. Glad
you all right, mate?
Yeah, I'm all good.
Good day, good day?
Sort of.
Yeah,
yeah, no, sort of.
Well, we're going to have a good evening because we have a special guest, Helen, who's sitting right in front of me. Helen, you're a vicar?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're a church planter, a mother of 6. My goodness, how do you get time to get into the Word of God? And you're in ministry in North Finchley.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, I'm Helen. I'm married to Mark, and we have 6 kids, one granddaughter as well. She's just lovely. It's nice to have grandkids. And I've been a Christian for 29 years now. And I met Jesus in the church that sent us to church plant, so St Barnabas Church in North Finchley. And when I met Jesus, I was a single mum living on an estate, and I was a teenager. And my mum, who's a Christian, said, "Oh, go down to St Barnabas, lots of nice young people down there." So I went down to St Barnabas, and I met Jesus at the door. That's the only way that I can describe what happened. So I'd been to church as a child, and they'd taught me loads about Jesus. So my head knowledge was great. You know, I could give you the books of the Bible and what was in them and all the rest. But I had no relationship with Jesus. And so when I hit my teenage years, I went really, really wild and found myself doing things and in places that I really shouldn't have been. If my kids did that stuff, I'd be mortified. And so anyhow, I walked into church, and people were worshipping, and they knew who they were worshipping. I could see it all over their faces, and I thought, if they can know him, I can know him too. And I think kind of the deal was done at the door, really. But I did wait to the end of the service, and somebody gave a word out, a word of knowledge, and I went up and got some prayer, and so they prayed for me, and I got the gift of tongues. And then they thought, well, we better check she's a Christian because they'd never seen me before. And so I said the official prayer after that. But I think, you know, the deal was done at the door, really.
You met him, didn't you?
Yeah, I met him at the door, you know.
Well, I was just going to ask you that. You know, what did he look like? Sorry.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
I'm just imagining the viewer who's just switched on tonight for the first time, never switched into Christian television, and you hear the sort of Christianese that we do speak about. You know, I met Jesus, and I was going to ask you when he first said it, where was he? In the front row, was he? But then you answered the question by saying, I met him at the door. So, but in the real world, you know, what is it that, rather than using that sort of terminology, I met Jesus, I came to know him, is that in an instant, it seems to be that was the case, that something spiritual happened to you at that moment. You were at the entrance of the church.
Yeah, and I guess the best way to describe it is coming home. Oh. I felt like I'd come home, that I would say now that I was fully known and fully loved. So whatever I'd done, I knew I was home, I was safe, I was fully loved. And it wasn't, you know, my parents are great, you know, it wasn't that I hadn't had that home experience, but I had a huge gaping hole in my life. Even as a kid, definitely as a teenager, but even as a kid, I had a gaping God hole in my life. And going to church didn't actually do anything, you know, to fill that hole. As a child, no, because it was all head knowledge, it wasn't heart knowledge.
So what was it that very moment when you got to the door, you met Jesus, metaphorically speaking?
I think it was in the worship. I think the presence of God, the Holy Spirit within, you know, the presence of God was there in the worship. So as we worship him, he meets with us, you know, and there was that heart-to-heart connection, really, that was happening there.
Wow. Okay, now you're involved in doing, may I say, from what I've just been reading, quite an amazing ministry, because you're you don't pussyfoot around, if I might say. You're actually out there.
Yeah.
Okay. You're not the vicar of Dibley, as you.
It's not all tea and cakes. Is
Yes, you know what I mean. Okay.
No, it's not.
Okay. And who was her companion?
it?
The vicar of Dibley. Anyway, she was a bit.
Actually,
She wasn't exactly John the Baptist, was she?
No.
So, anyway, tell us a little bit about the ministry, and then I know you've got lots of footage and things to show us tonight as well.
So 11 years ago, we moved into Strawberry Vale, and that's a top 10 deprivation estate in East Finchley. So, do you know, like many of our suburban areas, they're actually quite wealthy, and then you get these pockets of deprivation on estates in them. And do you know, I'd been the kids pastor at the big church, and then I'd been the community pastor, and we'd done some great work on another local estate, but we were a bit like the SAS. We went in, we did some great stuff, and we went home. And we saw one or two people come to know Jesus. I think the community was better because we were there, but it really struck me that one morning we went in to do some parenting stuff, parenting group, and we couldn't really do anything because all people were talking about was Mad Machete Man, who'd been running around the estate half naked the night before. And it just struck me then that, you know, we weren't sharing in their sufferings. We didn't go through what they went through. And I think at that moment I thought, no, we've got to move into an estate. I can't say, you know, God loves you and we love you, but we're going to live in a nice house down the road. You know, we're not going to share what you're going through. And for me, do you know, that's what Jesus did for us in the incarnation, in there. You know, he left the glory and splendour of heaven and came down to earth to be with us, and born into a really difficult family situation and born into poverty as well. And so that's that was our driving force to moving into Strawberry Vale.
Yeah. Well, we've got a video which is going to help us to understand a little bit more about what you're doing. Thanks.
Yeah.
Have a look at this.
I lived here for 17 years, and when I got here it was a bit, you know, it was a bit run down and no light coming out from anywhere, but when the church got here it really brightened up the whole estate, the whole neighbourhood, and it really brought a new light to the whole estate. It brought a new light, it brought people together really. It's just amazing, it really is.
My daughter was the one that got me to go to church because she went to a few kids groups and went to a few services and said, "Mum, you've got to come, it's really good." So I went along myself, and without reaching out to the kids, you can't get to the parents as well, because the kids go home and they tell their parents what a great experience they've had, and it sort of encourages the parents to come along and join in as well.
If the church wasn't here, it would be, you know, I would still be doing stupid stuff. I'd still be doing drugs and, you know, doing robbery, and, you know, a lot of other people would.
This community without the church wouldn't be what it is now. It would be totally shambles in this estate.
It's given people a sense of belonging, a sense of community. We all help each other out. It's more like a family feeling than being on your own.
So if it's true that churches transform local communities here in the UK, what I've realised is that areas, estates, communities are changed one by one. I've seen it happen here in North London.
Quite often I've heard the phrase, "You're not really a normal vicar." And I don't go out of my way to break stereotypes, I just am who I am on this estate. But people, particularly those who've never been to church at all, have got a very set idea in their heads of what a vicar is, and indeed of what a Christian is. And they think you've got to live by this huge set of rules, and you've got to do this and you're never allowed to do that. And we're just there, we're being normal and letting people see that to have a relationship with Jesus can be a normal part of your life, can be an amazing part of your life, but that we're actually just normal people.
If you really want real fulfillment where you think you're affecting people's life, Estate Church offers that for you. What do you want from your ministry? Do you want to change life? Do you want to affect people's life? Do you want to bring Christ into their life? Well, you'll get every opportunity on Estates, because you're seeing people in a position where they're crying out for help, where they're crying out for something to make their life worthwhile. And I think ministry in an estate offers that.
Jesus came to announce good news to the poor. And yes, we can say that we're all poor in spirit, but there's a real sort of poverty when people are relying on food banks, when the benefits have been stopped, when people are lending money to family members and actually going without themselves. Then it's times like that that they need to hear the good news and that there is hope. Often people in these kind of areas need to know that they're loved and that they're forgiven by God, rather coming to church and feeling we're going to sort of really go on about sin.
Right at the beginning of his public ministry, Jesus stood up in the synagogue in Nazareth and he told people what he'd come to do. "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me," he said, "to proclaim good news to the poor." Jesus began a movement which utterly transformed what it means to be human, and he did so from the edges, from the forgotten and from the marginalised and the poor. If we're serious about the renewal of Christian life in our nation, we need to do what Jesus did. It's from the edges, amongst the marginalised, that renewal will come. It's so important, therefore, that the church recommits itself to presence, to service, to proclamation, to a ministry of love on our big outer estates. It's from there that renewal will come.
Some good work going on there, Helen. Tell us a little bit, because we ran two of the clips together. So Philip North,
Yes.
he's the vicar there that was in the last clip that we just saw.
Yeah.
You said he's got a tremendous heart for the poor.
Yeah, so he's a Bishop of Burnley and he heads up the Estates Evangelism Task Group, which is part of the Church of England. And he spoke to General Synod and put a motion forward about churches reconnecting with our estates to have a worshipping community on every estate. And the Church of England actually committed to do that. And that will change how we do everything in the Church of England. You know, it will change what we do with our buildings. It will change what we do in deploying staff and team. It will change where we put our money, because actually the per head money spent in terms of rural and estates, actually a lot less is spent on estates than it is in rural areas. And it will change how we train people as well, because what we want to see is local leaders coming up who can really speak the language of the estates. Mm-hmm. But Philip is such a great champion. He's wonderful.
Yeah. Do you have any idea, to put it into perspective, Helen, what the costs are that are spent on the rural areas as opposed to on the estates, where you've got multiple dwellings, of course, and many more people's lives that you can affect?
I haven't got the stats with me, but they're out there. So if people Google the Bishop of Burnley and kind of that kind of quote, they can find that out.
Okay. So other things that you're doing, Helen, in the communities, you know, if you were to say in a nutshell to our viewers today, what is it you want to achieve that our viewers could help, or someone could help you get to that goal?
I guess the big vision is a worshipping community on every estate. I know that's just like a crazy vision to have, but I feel that's what God has put in our hearts. So what we've seen God do on our estate, we want to see happen on other estates. So when we moved in, we really wanted to bless the community. And we felt it was really important that things were better because a group of Christians had moved in. Whether people came to know Jesus or not, life should be better because the Christians are there. And I think something that Christians are great at is forming communities. And so that sense of allowing people to belong to our community. So we've got a strapline that says, come as you are. And we really mean that, you know. You can come to our church on a Sunday. You can be part of our community whether you know Jesus yet or not, whether you look like a Christian, whether you sound like a Christian, whether you're just looking. Just come and be part of our community and experience God. So we want to allow people to belong to our community, and then we know that they'll come to believe in Jesus, because actually when you see the church in action, you know, loving one another, forgiving, accepting, offering hope, offering a fresh start. I mean, who'd want to say no to that? And so, you know, we see people come to believe in Jesus. And then as they do that, they then start to become all that God has called them to be. So I think, you know, a lot of people look on, and I think it was true of myself, actually, as a teenage mum on an estate. People think, oh, you know, they'll never amount to anything. And actually, that's just so not true. If God made all of us, then he's given all of us gifts and skills. And it's actually, you know, drawing those out of people and helping them to become all that God has created them to be. But I think one of the important things is that we didn't go in with a kind of hit list of what we wanted to do. We went in very much and we wanted to serve the community. So what were their dreams, their hopes, their aspirations, and how could we serve them in doing that? Because, you know, we serve a servant king, don't we? And we really wanted to model that.
Give us an example, Helen, please, of you know, just of a tip of somebody that you've actually said those words to. How can we help you? I mean, going in to serve is exactly what Jesus did. He didn't come to be served. He came as a suffering servant, didn't he, as well? And so the examples that you're putting into practice are being a help to the community in some way. You're not trying to make converts as such. You want to deal with the problems, help people to have a hope for the future, equip them to meet those particular future goals as well.
Yeah.
And what sort of practical ways can you do that? Like, if you've got an example, can you picture somebody in your mind?
I think, do you know, we've got a lot of joblessness on the estate, and especially with some of the young guys who've not finished education. So things like helping them fill out application forms, getting them to job interviews, making sure they've got the right clothes, making sure their clothes are washed, helping them know what to say and how to say it, being a reference for people.
So giving them some skills of how to communicate in order to get a job or something, or be prepared in a way to do an interview, or to.
And they're the sort of things, Howard, that normal people, inverted commas, take for granted, don't they?
Yeah.
You know, you wouldn't give 2 seconds of thought about, oh, my CV, you know, how do I spell my name? How do I get my clothes clean, you know? Do I need to have a shave for an, you know? We don't give it a second thought, do we?
No.
So we get used to the level of life that we live. But I'm reminded, Helen, of that line from the Lord, the poor you will always have with you.
Yeah.
And so this ministry that we're in, and you at the sharp end, is a never-ending ministry, because the Lord said they'll always be with you, poor in spirit, poverty. It's always going to be one of the two. So this is a never-ending.
And I think it comes from I don't think it was Jesus' design that the poor was always with us, because, you know, there's going to be no poor people, you know, eventually. It's going to be wonderful. But actually, because our brokenness in humanity, it causes poverty. And it's a sign of our brokenness and our sign that society needs Jesus.
Amen. So the advantages really of being in the community rather than just sitting in the church waiting for people to come in are what?
Well, I think gone are the days where we can just sit in a building and ask people to come to us. It's not the model Jesus used. So Jesus, as I said, in the incarnation, left the glory and splendour of heaven and came down to earth. But also, you know, he went out and was with the people. He did life with the people. And so I just really feel that we've got to do that. We've got to be part of our communities and see what God is doing out there in our community. Because I remember we were having a prayer meeting in our house, and Jesus said to me, look out the window. And, all right, I'm looking out the window, because our house is right in the middle of the estate. And it was like in my mind's eye, I saw Jesus walking in and out of people's front doors. And he said, I've been here longer than you've been here. And that's the truth, isn't it? That Jesus has been in those communities long before we got there. And he's been working on people's hearts, and he's been drawing people to him long before we got there. You know, we do the planting, we do the watering, but actually he brings the growth and he brings people to salvation.
Okay, you mentioned earlier on, Helen, that you struggled as a teenager, as most of us do, and as our own children do, and our grandchildren are going to do, and it's been since time immemorial. But so the changes that you had to go through led you to that place where you actually ended up being ordained, right? So how old were you when you were ordained?
So that was about 10 years ago. I was just probably 41. Yeah,
my goodness. I mean, that's, you know, that was a big change to make. What were you doing before?
So I'd been working for the big resource church in Finchley, St Barnabas Church, and I'd been their cleaner, and I'd been their kids pastor, and I was their community pastor after that. It's always been a great church to work for, because they've let you kind of grow with them. And do you know, I probably felt 10 years before that a call to ordained ministry. But in my stream of the church, there was no ordained women. You know, women had just started to be ordained, but I didn't know any. And so I had to first really look in the Bible and see, actually, did I feel that it was okay? And once I got over that kind of hurdle, I was looking out there for role models. And the Lord said to me, no, you've got to be the role model for others coming up. And I remember having a conversation with the then vicar, and I could hardly get the word out of my mouth, ordination. It was like, ordination wasn't for people like me, from places like mine, who had a history like I did. I mean, you know, when I've been preaching in the big church, there's people have walked in and almost you can see their jaws drop, because I've lived in the same area all my life, and
so people recognised you?
People recognise me.
Oh, that's so, Helen, you know.
Oh yeah,
partying Helen.
And so, and in you know, that is in some ways a wonderful testimony if that's what the Lord does. You know, he can turn around this broken teenager who did all the wrong things in all the wrong places, and she can be standing on the front and sharing about Jesus. So so it took me time. It really took me time to get to the point where I could say yes. And even the night before I was ordained, I did have almost a kind of Gethsemane moment. You know, we had a retreat down in St Catherine's Dock, which, do you know, the Lord's good, isn't he? Because I shouldn't say hate, but my favourite place is in the countryside. It's all green, and it just gets a bit boring after a while. And yeah, I love towns and I love being around people, because people are the pinnacle of God's creation. So I was sitting there, so we did this retreat, and thankfully it was in St Catherine's Dock. So there was loads of people around. I just sat on a bench in St Catherine's Dock and said, you know, Lord, are you really, really calling me to this? Because it's a very public ministry, being ordained. I mean, and especially when you live in an estate, you're like in a goldfish bowl. Do you know, people are looking at your marriage, they're looking at your family, they're looking at what you do with your money, they're looking at everything. And we're not perfect by any means, but we love Jesus. And
join the club, Helen. We're not perfect.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You almost become a bit like a celebrity, don't you? That little dog collar around your neck, as you walk around, it puts you on display. Puts you on the front window, doesn't it?
It does.
It's quite pressurised, isn't it?
Yeah.
I remember somebody said to me, and I can't mention the name because they're for certain reasons, but he said, you made a comment really basically because I attended church, that I was perfect. I said, no, the reason I attend church is because I'm imperfect.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to help to change me, coming to know the ways of Jesus. And I'd ask him this question, really, having been a testimony, really, to others in your community, what lives were touched? Can you give us some examples of the lives that were touched by your contemporaries, but were outside the church at the time?
So, I mean, as I said, I was a single mum on an estate, and so when my son was 18, I felt really driven to contact his dad. I hadn't seen his dad for 18 years, and and in hindsight, I should have had much more conversation with my eldest son about it. It wasn't the easiest thing for him because it was kind of forced on him. But, God is so good because he came to know Jesus, and my son was in the pool helping to baptise him. The Lord puts families together in an amazing way. And I think that our family isn't perfect. We're a blended family. Do you know what I mean? We had our ups and our downs, and I think actually being part of our estate, there's lots of people who are in a similar situation than that. And I just think about people who are really struggling with family breakup or addiction or things like that, and we a lot of the time we walk with people in those situations and walk them through it. We can't put it right for them, but we can walk through it with them and love them and keep pointing them to Jesus and keep bringing them into God's presence. And he has a wonderful way of bringing families together in extraordinary ways. And in some ways I don't feel I can share their testimonies because it's their testimony, it's very personal to them. But we have seen some extraordinary things of families coming together, people being free from addiction, of people just going from no hope to full of hope. Oh, that's wonderful, Callie. She didn't want to go under the water, so we thought we're going to get her really, really wet there. And that's her grandson, little Sean. Oh, he was our first real Church at 5 baby, who was kind of born as Church at 5 started. So that's fantastic. And
so is this like a baptism that you?
Yeah, it was a baptism. Okay. So we just like bring in the big tank and we do full immersion baptisms, but it just for them it just wasn't going to work, and they got really wet anyhow.
Helen, what you're describing is the Lord redeeming our lives from the pit, and he does it for everyone in the end, doesn't he? That anyone that comes to him, that's why he said, blessed are the poor in spirit, because all the while that you're dependent on yourself, you don't realise your need of a Heavenly Father. But when you are absolutely pressed down, like Paul, crushed, perplexed, in despair, despairing even of life, there we go. If anyone's feeling suicidal out there, even the Apostle Paul despaired even of life itself, okay? You're not alone. And this is what the Lord does. He sets our feet upon a rock again, doesn't he?
He does.
He really does, Helen.
With everything you're doing, I mean, it sounds like, a real full day, an evening probably, if the truth were known. How do you balance all that with your family life,
I guess, so we don't have a church building, so yes, we meet on a Sunday at the community centre, but a lot of what happens in our home and other team members' homes as well. So our family are just part of it, We have small groups, we have youth groups, we have meetings, and it's a real kind of hub of the church. I guess how I balance it, I really try and keep an ear on what God's saying and what the Holy Spirit's saying, because, You know, you can get a text coming through and it seems really, really urgent, but I can't answer everything immediately. I can't do everything immediately. And I just ask the Lord, do I need to deal with this now? Will this wait to the morning? Do I need to push it on to somebody else? Because the need is so, so great. It is, you know.
Well, it could be 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
We worked for a very short period of time, 6 months, doing work in a community in very poor, on the borders of Haiti and other places. And people were starving, people were in need of medical help, and sadly we saw some people die. So there was all of that, and you could be going all night and all day. It's almost impossible, but there are times when it wears you out. There just isn't enough energy, you know, enough resources perhaps as well. So what do you do in times like that?
I try and stick close to Jesus, because his shoulders are broader than mine, and I've got to stick close to him so he carries the yoke and I don't, because I can't do it. I can't do it. We have a great team. You can't do estate stuff on your own. We have a fantastic team, and so when it gets too much, we just we're able to pass things on to one another. And we also have some really good partnerships as well with other organisations. So we're partnered obviously with our sending church, a big resource church, St Barnabas, and they're fantastic. You know, they just financially they support us, but we know that they're always there to kind of help us out, and they're cheering us on. But we also partner with Eden as well, which is part of the Message Trust, and actually just a real support just generally from the Church of England. You wouldn't think it, you know, the dear old Church of England, but actually they're just cheering us on so much. Yeah, it's great.
Very good. What I'd like to do is have a look at this next video, which is about, is it Bishop Thorpe, is it?
Yeah, so Rick Thorpe is one of the bishops in London, works with Bishop Sarah, and he's a church planting bishop, so that is his role and his remit. And also within the London diocese, he has a kind of estates under his portfolio as well.
Okay, well, let's have a look at this video.
Welcome to the Centre for Church Planting and Growth. This is a new venture in the Church of England to support and resource churches that want to start new worshipping communities in the places where they are. We've got 3 core objectives. First of all, to start or renew 100 new worshipping communities in the London diocese by 2020. This is part of our capital vision. Secondly, it's to start or renew 100 city centre resource churches all over England. That's where diocesan bishops want to have that as part of their church planting strategy. And thirdly, it's to support 100 parish churches in the London diocese to grow healthily and numerically by joining a church growth learning community. So we exist to support these goals, and we do that through consultations, through coaching, through training and through funding. Where we can, we want to give away all that we're learning and also learn from others by resourcing the wider church. And the amazing thing about church planting and starting new worshipping communities is that it's globally recognised as the most effective way of growing the church. I'm so excited to see this happening here. So let's answer Jesus' call to go and make disciples of all nations, to spread the good news of Jesus Christ. Let's see our neighbourhoods, our towns and cities transformed by the gospel.
I've got to say that there probably will be, hopefully, hundreds of thousands of people wanting to actually do what you do. But let's say there's one person out there tonight, or a couple, and they want to email in live@revelationtv.com and want to find out how if it is that you could get started in a community work, a community project, rather than waiting for people to come into your church or wherever it is that you're running. Hopefully something will touch your heart tonight, and also in a practical way that Helen can actually help you. So write in and ask Helen what it is that would help you to understand better and perhaps practical ways in which you can get started. I mean, this is quite heartening, I have to say, to hear that the Church of England is involved in such, can I call it, good works? Because without, as James said, show me your faith by your works. It's no good just saying, oh, well, I'm a Christian, I have faith and I believe in God. But he really put the nail on it by saying, you show me your faith by your works. Yeah. It's not by works that you get into heaven, but you have to demonstrate your faith by getting off your backside, if I may say, just like what you guys are doing, and obviously your colleagues. So what is it for you tonight? Just pick up that email or text. The numbers and the contacts are all there on your screen. Live at revelationtv.com. We are live tonight, and it's Thursday night. It's Q&A. And it's the 28th of March. Just so you know, if you see this is a repeat, it's no good texting in or emailing.
I think the viewers are probably shocked tonight, Hal, because we've gone from discussing Israel, Armageddon, Ezekiel 38, pre-trib, post-trib, Calvinism, Arminianism, to Helen doing the heavy stuff. Yeah. The real Lord stuff, that the Bible is complete with. This is hands-on stuff, and if I had a hat, I'd take it off to you. I've got a hat.
The Vicar of Dibley, where did you get that nickname?
Well, we come in all shapes and sizes, us ordained people. When I was ordained, I started using Twitter, and I didn't want to put Rev or Pastor, so I thought, well, if I put Urban Dibley, then they'll get the idea of what I did. But I guess there are some similarities to village life and estate life. It's a small, closed community. Everybody knows everything about everybody else. We're all a bit quirky and, but yeah, that's where it came from, really.
Do you think we would fit in?
I think
being a bit quirky.
I think they'd love you guys. Yeah. I think they'd love you. I think it's interesting. The one thing I've learned about estates ministry is it doesn't matter who you are. You can be as posh as you like, or you can be as working class as you like. But it's about being who you are, because people sniff out if you're trying to be something you're not. They really don't like it. It's that real integrity, so people can trust who you are. So our team has everybody in it. It's great.
Yeah. And do you know what? The road to self-acceptance, Helen, is for a lot of people is very hard, isn't it? And I'm just talking from personal experience here. You spend your life always not quite happy with yourself and trying to be someone else. And when you meet a bunch of guys and girls like you that are actually, you realise that you're perfectly loved as you are. Yeah. Your past is redeemed and taken away, and all your sins are forgiven and blotted out. Not only blotted out, but completely forgotten by the Lord, And that's what I love, The Old Testament is all about having your sins covered for a year, But the Lord turns up with his new covenant and says, Helen, Mark, Howard, all that stuff in the past, what stuff? It's gone. It's absolutely gone. And self-acceptance is absolutely vital, because we are made in God's image. And the moment that you can accept that you are perfectly loved, perfectly accepted, and we've all got different gifts. I can barely change a light bulb. I'm so candid. Vicky does it, basically. I'm absolutely useless. And I've got used to that idea. But God gives us all different gifts, just in various ways, Accept your gifts, use them, and just accept you can't do everything,
Yes, our quirkiness, is often can be quite attractive to other people, as you say. Just being yourself and admitting, look, God had to deal with me, and he's got a sense of humour because he made Mark.
Exactly. I know.
But have you got any projects in the pipeline for Finchley then?
Yeah, so when we started church plant on Strawberry Vale, we actually had 3 estates in mind, and so we're just in the baby stages of planting a new church on our neighbouring estate, and it's going to be very different because there's no community building there. So we're going to have to really do it in people's homes, which is new for us. Yes, we have small groups and whatever, but we do gathered church on a Sunday. So we won't be able to do that. But I think one of the beautiful things is that some of our local leaders are going to be helping us with that new church plant. So normally, you know what it's like on estates? People from one estate often won't go on to another one. But actually, because what God has done in their lives, they're actually happy now to go over on the other estate and serve them and share their stories with them. And then we've got a third estate that we really want to look at planting into. So we started with the end in mind that we want 3 church plants, but the big vision is a worshipping community on every estate.
And what would that take? How are you going to achieve that?
What, a worshipping community on every estate?
I mean, let's take one estate. When you say worshipping, so I mean, you've got your own example.
Yeah.
But if somebody out there tonight, as I said earlier, wants to actually follow your lead and have a worshipping church or worshipping people on an estate that is, you know, wouldn't normally be associated, as it were, with a church community. So how would they do that?
I think that the great thing is to prayer walk first. Start to prayer walk the estate. Ask the Lord to point out things to you, what you need to pray into. Really look at the history of the estate. So what kind of good ancient wells are there that we can kind of dig up with prayer? But actually also, what do we need to clean out with prayer on their estate as well? It's a really good thing to find out whether there's other Christians living on the estate. Because often people can live on an estate and they think they're there just by chance, but actually the Lord's placed them there. So actually helping to give them that vision that, do you know, God's placed them there and that they can be witnesses to their neighbours and that they can see people come to know Jesus. I think serve the community, find out what they need and then serve them rather than coming in with your ideas about what you think needs doing. I'd also say, if you at all can, move it onto the estate. You know, it really... So
actually be a part,
be a part of it.
Do you have any examples, or is that something you encourage and actually participate in yourself by actually moving into one of the...
Yeah, so we live on Strawberry Vale. So we moved into Strawberry Vale 11 years ago with 5 of our 6 kids. Our eldest lives in Bristol now. So, yeah, we moved in. We've got other team members who have moved in as well. And on the new estate that we're planting into, we've got 1 team member there, and there's other team members that are kind of nestled behind the estate. We're trying to get them on. But I think you can be part of a community even if you don't live there. So it's where you invest your time and where you invest your relational time, who you choose to be friends with. And they may be very different people than you normally you would make friends with. Even silly things like where you shop. You know, we try and every day go into our little estate shop, you know, because everybody goes in there and you get to chat to people on the way there and back. But also, so when you're walking around your estate thinking, okay, where will these people be shopping? Where can I go and be with them? Where will they be socially? Where can I go and be with them? So really making yourself part of that community.
All right. There's a testimony, is there, Joe's story that we can see as well?
Yeah, so
tell us about that.
We are part of the Eden network. So Eden are part of the Message Trust, and they move people into estates. And so we've partnered with them on the Grange. So they're one of our many partners. And so Joe's story is part of that. So it's not our story; it's part of that wider network that we're part of.
Yeah, let's have a look at Joe's story.
Just 3 years ago, Joe Sheeran from Wheatley in Doncaster was a long-term drug addict. What had started out as fun during the party scene of the early 90s had spiralled into a life of hard drugs and crime. Neither prison nor rehab had any effect on Joe for almost 20 years.
I always ended up back on the drugs. I just felt trapped in there. I didn't feel as though there was a way out. And I thought that, you know, that's how it was going to be. I thought I was going to die an addict.
In desperation, Joe cried out to God for help. His prayer was answered just days later when he met members of the New Eden Wheatley team.
I remember saying that I really feel as though, you know, God has placed you in my life to encourage me and to take me on this journey.
Joe gave his life to Christ. The Eden team helped him to get a job at the rehab centre where he used to be a client and encouraged him to start sharing his story with others.
When Joe speaks to people about the difference that Jesus has made, it's really compelling. It's so powerful because it's fresh, it's real, and it's literally changed his life.
You know, I'd been an addict for 20 years. You know, I always thought I was unemployable. I've got nothing to offer society. I've realised through encouragement that I have got plenty to offer.
Now Joe is in the process of joining Eden Wheatley, as well as helping Pod to lead the Bacon and Bible gatherings. Joe recently set up his own group in his flat for men who are just like he was.
It's just a bunch of guys getting together, you know, just to encourage each other, just to enjoy each other's friendships and to support each other. There's some people there are very new to faith, and that's the people that we've got a heart for, you know, for people who have either don't know Jesus yet or are just sort of like discovering God. You know, I've been helped. I've been supported out of my darkness, and I think, and I just like to, you know, to show that to other people.
With the help of God, he's turned his life around in a dramatic way. You know, from really dark, desperate times to somebody who is serving God and serving other people and living a great life that is so different to the one that he used to have.
Well, that's an amazing testimony. Joe's story is incredible. And if you want to become effective in your ministry and reach out to people just like Joe, do write in and email us live@revelationtv.com, and also SMS us. The contact details are there on your screen. This is powerful stuff, Helen, and so encouraging. But all the people that you're involved with are having to make an incredible effort and get off their backside, really, basically. And it's not just about evangelizing. And I remember on one of the first clips that I was watching earlier on, the vicar there was actually saying, look, we don't just talk about sin. We're actually going out there to help people in these poorer communities. And you could see how you've turned Joe's life around. Yeah. That's so lovely, and it's a great testimony, and that's what we want to see more of, I'm sure.
Well, my heart is touched. We've got a lovely one here from Andy from Coventry. Hi all, St Andrew's Church, Hope Centre, Bolton, on the Johnson Fold estate. They run a very different type of food bank called the Storehouse Pantry. The people pay a one-off fee of £1 to join. They can then shop there once a week and pick up to 20 items, including fresh food and bread, and pay just £2 a week to shop. They are making a massive difference in that place. This is my home parish where I grew up, the parish of St Peter Hallwell. It's one of the daughter churches of Making a Difference, and that's Andy from Coventry.
Well done, Andy.
Do you know, Helen, my heart is touched.
Yeah.
Really is touched. You know?
So, you know, we often, when we think about ministries, it's like going overseas. Yeah. You know, and there are so many needs here in this country already. And we're seeing more of that. We're hearing more about it because there are more and more families actually having to rely upon food banks. But it's not just being there with some of the practical things. It's that making a friend of your neighbour, you know, which is, Jesus said, you know, to love your neighbour, to demonstrate that love in a practical way. Bonds people together. And it makes me think, and I wrote this note down, surely the local councils that when they observe this, and the other government bodies, what do they say to you about what you're doing? Are they helpful?
Yeah,
Or?
Do you know, I think the council work with us. They work with faith groups because they realise faith groups are the ones that stick in there. When all the cuts happen, we're all still there, you know, because we're volunteer-based. So, and our team are getting an award next week from Barnet for the work we've done. So there was a fire on our neighbouring estate, and because we had a team member living there, the team was out within 5 minutes. And it was really quite a big fire. And one of our team members, who's one of our local leaders, chairs the management group of the Green Man where we meet. And she got that open because we take our guys camping and all the rest. We had all the lilos out and the sleeping bags. We were able to take tea and coffee up there. We were able to pray with people as well. It's shocking as they saw their houses, their flats, just go up in flames.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Again, great that you, as a community, were able to, you know, get on the phone or the blower or whatever it is and pull the people together. And they weren't like going somewhere blind because they're already familiar with the estate and the situation that called for immediate action. Well done. Now, you've got a church planting conference coming up. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so there's so Rick and his team have got 2 church planting conferences, one in London and one in Leeds. I'm going to be in the London one. I'm going to be sharing a bit of our story there and doing a bit of a advice panel as well there. So I think if people are really interested in church planting, even if it's baby steps, I'd encourage them to come along to that.
Well done. Well, we've got a little promo for that, so let's have a look at that.
Church planning is evangelism in community. That's it. Out of nothing, something has happened, which is wonderful.
There is no such thing as a typical church plant.
How do we both sustain what already exists, but what do we do from here?
Great. May I say, very well produced promos and videos that you're presenting here tonight, Helen. Bless you. Okay, emails and texts, any questions that are coming in? Let's have a look.
Oh, all right.
Nothing.
We've got David. David's very happy that Brexit hasn't been mentioned.
Oh, right, yeah. Oh, you just did.
He said it after 15 minutes and 25, so he's absolutely ecstatic, yeah.
Now, in the news, even just the last couple of days, I think it was yesterday, they were talking about it, where some of the ways in which, if you're putting a new block of flats, say, for example, like the ones that are above where we are, when they were built 10 years ago, they had to make a provision for, if you like, the poorer members of our community. And they were able to have this free housing almost. I'm not quite sure the terminology for it, but it does mean that people who are less fortunate, for those who can afford to buy an apartment in a block like this, can actually just rent it at a very low rent. That obviously is something that's commensurate with whatever their income is, or even if they're on income support. Now, when there is, like there was this week, this example of they've got a play area right, where for those who are less fortunate and are part of this, what do you call it, assisted housing or something?
I think it would be social housing or affordable housing that they were talking about.
Yeah.
Although a lot of affordable housing actually isn't affordable.
Right. Well, I mean, I know the block of flats up there that, you know, $500,000 for a 2-bedroom apartment, which is ridiculous. No, not many people would be able to afford that. So, you know, unless there was affordable housing in this block, for example, they wouldn't be able to come into it. So, but then you've got what has happened in this latest development is that you've got the children are not from the poorer families are not allowed to mix with the other piece of land, which is where their friends are, because children have no barriers and boundaries in that sense, and their friends they want to play with now have been segregated. It's a segregation, and this is happening in our somewhere in London, I believe.
Yeah, I briefly saw that on social media too. I mean, yes, the housing development have to put in a certain amount of social housing, a certain amount of affordable housing. Often that will be shared ownership, as well as the kind of pucker end of it as well. But often what developers do is, if it's on an expensive site, they won't put the social housing there. They'll find a bit of cheaper land and put the social housing on there. But even if you do have mixed development, so like on some of the estates that are being built, actually you'll see the difference in the blocks. So one block will have a concierge with it and be really nice, and then another block won't. And it will be spec'd out at a different level. I mean, in some ways it's a really good thing, because what they're looking to do is to have real community cohesion. So, you know, that actually neighbour can help neighbour, that not everybody is in the same situation. And that, I think, is a really good aspiration. But actually there's help that's needed to do that. It doesn't happen just on its own. A friend of mine is the vicar over in Tottenham Hale, and they've got a mixed estate, and the church play a vital role in being the bridging between the communities, and it's where the communities from the old estate and the new estate meet. And so I think it's really important that developers look to, I think churches are great at doing that, and look to putting churches in these big new developments.
Okay. I'm thinking, going back, unless there's anything particularly you want to share, I would like to go back to a time when you were talking about, you as a woman was thinking, well, you know, what examples are there in the Bible of women in ministry, or even women in the Bible, you know, that have, you know, been recorded there for our benefit so that we can learn from it? Was there any particular women in the Bible that spurred you on, gave you some encouragement to do what you do?
I think I actually probably more struggled with Paul's passages. On women in leadership, to be honest.
Yeah, because he was very much, you know, people would call him a misogynist, you know. Yeah. But I mean, I don't believe that. But I do. I can see passages that actually would sort of look like he's, especially in the 21st century, wouldn't be acceptable. You know?
Yeah, and but I think what really helped me was reading around it. So realising that he was talking to a particular group of people in a particular place. So in Ephesus, there was the cult of Diana, and actually women were over elevated and they held the power. And so what he was doing, he was speaking to that particular group, and he was actually lifting up men in that situation, because that needed to happen. So I think when we read those passages, we need to read them in light of who he's writing to, where it is,
what the situation
what was happening in that time. But, you know, I work with lots of guys who don't believe in ordaining women and women in leadership. But there's so much more that we do agree about. And so I'm quite happy to work alongside them, you know. the church is broad, isn't it?
So are the Lord's shoulders.
Yes, yeah, and he has to carry all of that, and I don't. So
but maybe you're putting men to shame, really, because I think when you look at church generally, if you look around a church congregation, you'll see very few men compared to women. Women seem to be drawn to Jesus far easier, and men find it a struggle. And maybe because it's something that females have a much, bigger heart, as it were, and more sensitive to the Lord's calling than men. But nevertheless, let me come back to some of the examples I think are great in women, if I may say so. Like the Book of Esther. The story of Esther is incredible. But she had quite a challenge in there, even though Queen Vashti and everything had been had risen above herself because of the way she treated the king. Ahasuerus, was it?
Ahasuerus, yeah.
And he obviously he had to look for another wife, and Esther came along. And the way that she was, her demeanour and everything else was amazing. And even come to the point at the end of the day of saving her people. That's where you get the time of Purim. One of the others...
I love Deborah.
Right, there you go. Okay, tell us about Deborah.
Oh, well, I just love Deborah. I don't think God makes mistakes when he chooses people and puts callings on people's life. So I don't think that it was just the men were all weak, and do you know what I mean? Actually, God wanted her to be a judge for a season for that time. Yeah, for that time. Yep. And I love Ruth as well, and Naomi. I love the women who hang around with Jesus as well. I love the fact that they were the first to witness the resurrection, and they're the ones that are going out there telling everybody. I love the Samaritan woman. That whole area was changed by her testimony. I love.
Stay with that though for a little while, because I mean, because it is, and these are great examples. And somebody listening tonight might think, well, what was so special about the Samaritan woman? Just to explain the situation.
Well, she was a fairly broken woman. I mean, first of all, she was out in the midday sun collecting water. Nobody then would do that. You would only do that if you really wanted to hide away. But she was a tenacious woman. I mean, she obviously the Samaritans and the Jews. Well, the Jews didn't like the Samaritans, and but she had a bit of an argy-bargy with Jesus. She really pushed him on stuff which I liked. And
but he knew that was coming as well.
Oh, yeah.
But it was great. Go on, tell us more about it, because it's nice to hear it from a woman's perspective as well.
And I think that when Jesus tells her, well, you've had more than one husband, and the guy you're living with now, he's not even your husband. There's not do you know what I mean? It's just she owns that. And she receives what Jesus has got for her. And then she goes and tells other people,
Because of the miracle, really, that here is somebody who has a word of knowledge, totally knows what her situation is, and exposes her, but does it discreetly because it's one-to-one.
Yes.
But then she goes off and says, this guy says he even knew my situation, And,
he's cut to the heart, isn't he?
Yeah, and he's a Jew.
Yeah.
But the Jews don't talk to the Samaritans.
But isn't that always the way that God uses almost those people that almost might offend us to just really speak right into the heart of it? Oh, yeah. But isn't that beautiful? Mary Magdalene you were saying about...
Weeping at the feet, because of knowing how much she, as a sinner, she is.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd say the lowest of the low. Yeah. And yet she probably has more faith in the resurrection, because she saw, obviously, she's trying to wake the other men up and say, look, he's risen. Yeah. No, come on.
You were
stories are
speaking about earlier that bit when Jesus says the poor will always be with you because they're having a go at her because she's used this precious oil. Why didn't you sell it and give it to the poor?
You know who it was, wasn't you?
Oh yeah, it was Judas, wasn't it?
Judas, yeah, and what he had his eye on the money anyway.
Yeah, he did. But just that humility to get that low in front of Jesus. It is utterly, amazing.
Got a lovely text here from Jean on this this way. Hi, Helen's ministry reminds me something that Dietrich Bonhoeffer once said, and the line is this, and it takes a bit of thinking. Jesus was a man for other people. So let that one float into your spirit there. Jesus was a man for other people. And often, you were saying, Howard, about it's often the lack of men in church, isn't it? You go and look at the congregation and it's by and large, mostly women a lot of the time, isn't it? And I think there's something about man that always thinks, no, I'm okay. Their pride needs to be just taken down, And so it's always, Jesus is always a man for other people because I'm all right, really. And they're not all right. And I speak, I'm a cab driver, and I speak to cab drivers in the cafe all the time. And I see this manliness that they exhibit. And it's not manliness, it's just protection mechanisms, really, because they're as broken as the next Tom, Dick and Harry, And actually, to them, Jesus will be a man for other people, but he is actually for them because they're crying out for it, but they won't admit it.
See, in our church, we're fairly evenly split. We started off with a group of the matriarchs of the estate, and then we had the lads of the estate. It was really weird. We've got the middle bits in it. But I think what we try and do is preach the whole gospel. So, actually, my experience of being a single mum, I knew I was a sinner. I knew I'd messed up in my life. It was quite obvious to me. I didn't need to be told I was a sinner. But what I hadn't kind of got, and what we try and preach the whole gospel, is that God has made you in his image. He doesn't make mistakes, But man fell, but God came and redeemed us in Jesus. And now he's got plans and purposes for you. He's going to put you back together. And not only that, he's going to put the whole of creation back together and put it right in the end. So, trying to preach the whole gospel there to actually, for people to realise, actually, they are good because God has made them good. They may be broken, and we all need Jesus, but actually they are good and there is hope for them and there is a future for them. And however bad it gets, God will put it all right in the end. Because it's not all right on the earth, is it, at the moment?
Far from it. And we're all broken if the truth were known. But it's just, the thing is, what I find, I don't want to be negative here, but some people would find when they go to church that people just gossip too much, and they don't look. If you like, if Mary Magdalene or the equivalent walked into the church today, what would they say? I'm not. All churches are not all the same, but generally speaking, they're ready. Some that are ready to point the finger and what have you. They don't. Jesus saw what Mary Magdalene was and everything, and other people that have their failings, but looked for the positive and to bring out the best in that person. And when somebody who's broken becomes put together like Humpty Dumpty again by Christ, we've all got that hopefully as a testimony in our lives, that we become productive, we become something that is also a help and to others who are in some sort of dire straits. But if we're not, haven't come from a brokenness, I think we tend to be less effective in our ministry. Yeah. And
but
that's probably what makes you successful.
There's something about, though, isn't there, that if you've been churched, you can hide your brokenness quite well. Mm-hmm. Whereas the unchurched don't tend to do that. So most of our guys most of our guys have you know, they haven't got a church background, so they don't hide things, and as pastor that's much easier. But this whole thing about gossip, it's interesting, isn't it? Because when we gossip, we point a finger at somebody else, and it's like deflects from us and our stuff. It's another way of hiding our stuff. So I think that's why, you know, that's why Jesus didn't do it, because he had no need to deflect from sin in his life because he was sinless. So you know, I think often gossip points to brokenness in our lives when we find ourselves doing that.
Yeah. I remember the Lord told the story about be very careful when you're having, you know, a meeting in your church, in your ecclesia, the synagogue, that the man that's well dressed and socially high, you don't just go and elevate him and put him at the front, and the little social downcast who comes in rags, you just say, oh, come sit over here by my feet, you know. You've got to be very careful with that. The Lord sees no hierarchy in man, you know. The Lord just sees people made in his image who are loved greatly, you know.
George Muller comes to mind. His story was, part of his ministry was when he came over from Germany, he'd come from a very posh and wealthy background, but when he started to go into Bible studies, because he'd lived a debauched life, he actually started to learn the grace of God and how what he was doing was wrong. But he came to England, he tried to get a job as a missionary, he went to the Missionary Society or something, and they said, well, you just don't qualify really. And in the end, I mean, he looked after thousands of children. But one of the things that he also did was start, I'm sure this is his story, he started a church. And because of what was happening in those days, the wealthy were able to buy the pews at the front. And those who were sick and those who were deaf and those who were infirm were at the back. And so he turned the tables literally and the seats around. So he said, right, the ones who were paying for the privilege of sitting at the front, actually, there's none of that. The poor will come to the front, and those that are needy come to the front. And I remember, and he even stopped the act of actually taking an offering, and he said the people will put in there what they want. The elder said, this won't work. And it was amazing because it was right in a certain extent that there was no money there. There was no money there week after week after week. But he made a point, and he made these changes, and they were unpopular, and I think it took like a year or something before it actually turned around. But then he ended up also looking after all the children as well, you know, that ministry that he had. I'm saying this because he was a man who had wealth, broken, sinner, turned around. Christ did something in his life, and he did so many good things for people in the end. So just because he recognized his sin and came to God and put him together again like Humpty Dumpty in a spiritual way.
The stories of he'd sit down with the kids to eat and there was no food, but they give thanks, and suddenly the doorbell would go and there'd be food outside, you know?
It was a knocker.
Do you know, I've got a lovely little story about that. When I was a single mum on the estate and like living on benefits, and it was tight. And I remember all we had left that day was a tin of value beans, and value beans are rank. And I prayed, and somebody turned up on the doorstep literally seconds later with bags of shopping.
Yeah.
Just God's provision. It was
amazing,
beautiful.
isn't it?
Wow.
Yeah.
What beans was that, Helen?
Heinz.
The
value beans. Have you?
I thought you gave another name. Oh, the value beans.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Bit dodgy.
Yeah.
Bit dodgy.
Bit dodgy.
Not like Heinz.
Not like.
Okay.
What Deborah says, thank you for your many good programmes and for your prayers. I've sent in some requests before. Thanks, and that is from Deborah.
Okay. Yeah, Deborah's listening tonight.
Yep. Deborah the judge.
Not the Deborah in the Bible, the Deborah somewhere in, hopefully. We've got viewers that have started watching in America now. So I just want to say a welcome to those who are tuning into Revelation TV. We're a little bit different to your normal Christian TV in the States, may I say. We're quite humble, hopefully, but we welcome you to joining us, hopefully, from this moment on, if you're switching in for the first time. because you'd always be welcome. You can see, you can put in an email or a text or whatever to ask questions, especially with our guests, special guests with their backgrounds and everything. It might be something that'd be practical there for you to hear and to follow some advice. Helen's got the most amazing ministry, and her colleagues are working with her as well. And it's heartening, really, for us to hear what the church, or part of the church, is doing, and hopefully all the church will be doing one day. It's not about sitting in a pew and waiting for the Lord to move in your life. The Lord is already asking us to move. Go out there, because the needs are great. It says the harvest is great, the workers are few. My take on that is the harvest is great and the shirkers are many. So, so it's a matter of getting out
known
there.
as a Howardism, that, isn't it?
That's it, yeah.
Howardism,
Yeah. Forgive me, Lord, but I know what I do. Sorry, I'll say.
You know, Howard, I'm thinking, you know, so much oxygen is used in debating theology, you know, and you need doctrine. Absolutely solid doctrine is absolutely vital to our walk with the Lord, you know. That's what the whole walk is about. There is truth and there is grace, and we're in danger of talking ourselves into oblivion, you know, with debating nuances and grey areas of what we think the Bible says and trying to debate each other under the table. And actually, there is room for that, and it's good. You grow, and you know, I debate with my son Jack. You know, he's been on Rev TV before. Lovely. He's off the charts with, you know, intelligence and anointing. I can't keep up with him, but we love it. You know, we love to really have a good old chat about all the heavy stuff. You know, like Calvinism and Arminianism. Did God choose you? Did you choose God? What do you call it? The atonement, is it for everyone? You know, did Jesus die for everyone or just the elect? And I love to, and it's interesting. But there comes a point, actually, when, you know, we could actually talk ourselves into oblivion and sitting there drinking our Costa coffees, talking about this stuff. And there's a dying world out there, Helen, isn't it?
Yeah.
An absolutely dying world that needs someone to go out, put an arm around them, tell them, hang on a minute, no, there is hope.
Yeah.
And I know his name.
But we could be just a clashing cymbal.
Clanging cymbal, that's right, yeah.
If we haven't got love, we could have the greatest, we could speak in tongues, we can move mountains, we can do all sorts of miracles, we can know all the scriptures inside out, but if we haven't got love, then we put the poorest in the church, in that sense that we're ineffective, and love covers a multitude of sins. And I think people are drawn to the work like what you're doing, Helen, because your love for fellow man is demonstrated by what you do in the practical sense. And look at that story. Was it Joe? Was it?
Yes.
I just think that's lovely. In fact, we've got a few minutes. I'd like to show that again, just to really give us all a bit of a boost. Have a look at this particular video of Joe's testimony and what happened to him because somebody cared to change his life and turn his life around.
Just 3 years ago, Joe Sheeran from Wheatley in Doncaster was a long-term drug addict. What had started out as fun during the party scene of the early 90s had spiralled into a life of hard drugs and crime. Neither prison nor rehab had any effect on Joe for almost 20 years.
I always ended up back on the drugs. I just felt trapped in there. I didn't feel as though there was a way out. And I thought that, you know, that's how it was going to be. I thought I was going to die an addict.
In desperation, Joe cried out to God for help. His prayer was answered just days later when he met members of the New Eden Wheatley team.
I remember saying that I really feel as though, you know, God has placed you in my life to encourage me and to take me on this journey.
Joe gave his life to Christ. The Eden team helped him to get a job at the rehab centre where he used to be a client and encouraged him to start sharing his story with others.
When Joe speaks to people about the difference that Jesus has made, it's really compelling. It's so powerful because it's fresh, it's real, and it's literally changed his life.
You know, I'd been an addict for 20 years. You know, I always thought I was unemployable. I've got nothing to offer society. I've realised through encouragement that I have got plenty to offer.
Now Joe is in the process of joining Eden Wheatley, as well as helping Pod to lead the Bacon and Bible gatherings. Joe recently set up his own group in his flat for men who are just like he was.
It's just a bunch of guys getting together, you know, just to encourage each other, just to enjoy each other's friendships and to support each other. There's some people there are very new to faith, and that's the people that we've got a heart for, you know, for people who have either don't know Jesus yet or are just sort of like discovering God. You know, I've been helped. I've been supported out of my darkness, and I think, and I just like to, you know, to show that to other people.
With the help of God, he's turned his life around in a dramatic way. You know, from really dark, desperate times to somebody who is serving God and serving other people and living a great life that is so different to the one that he used to have.
So you too can change someone's life, like Joe's life, if you want to and want to serve the Lord. And it means getting your hands dirty. It means going out there. And Helen and her organisations that she works with as well are doing a great job out there. So be encouraged. You know, it's not just a matter of hearing the Word of God. It's a matter of also letting that take root in your heart and it motivate you to action, you know, because you can see that as you read the scriptures, all the different people that suddenly were propelled into ministry because of the love of God shown and demonstrated for them enough to be able to motivate them. Helen, what are some of the things that you would say? In fact, there was a line that Joe said, you said, I loved that line. What was it?
It was about supporting, he was supported out of darkness. So that journey was somebody journeying with him and supporting him. They couldn't fix it, but they walked with him, and that's our experience. We can't fix it all, but we know somebody who can, and we all support people in their journey.
You remind me of an old advert that used to be on the TV 20, 30 years ago. I know a man who can.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember? I think it was the...
You're showing your age, Helen. Yeah. I'm struggling to remember that one.
That was one, I think it was the AA, it was for somebody like that. But I know we were looking to foster children at the time, and the social workers came around to see Leslie and I and said, well, we think you will make good foster parents. And in the end, we did foster many, many children over 13 years. Yeah.
Wow.
But what I had to say to the social worker, because you know we didn't really have a lot of income or anything like that at the time, she said, but how are you going to get everybody in here? Well, it was a very small flat, but I said, I know a man who can. I said, we will sell this place and we'll get we didn't. It was prayer, really. We ended up got the most incredible amount of money for the flat. And in fact, the woman who bought it, her bank had said, look, this is overpriced by 50,000 or something like that. And she said, I want it anyway. And the name of the estate agent was called Lords. There were so many things. And we were able to put that money to a house that we had to put a bid in for. The local council owned it. And it was all boarded up, a bit derelict. And I said, this will do it, we'll do this. And I had to put a sealed bid in. And I remember putting £110 on the end of so many thousands. And they said afterwards, we can't tell you what it was, but it was so close. And I'm thinking it was even the £110.
Yeah.
Just about made it.
Yeah, and we ended up fostering many children in that house. And so, yeah, all these things are possible when they seem impossible and against the odds. Where do you make a start? Just get up and walk and say, Lord, take me to wherever it is you want me to be and help me.
Got a beautiful text here, Howard. God bless you, Howard. Your channel has changed and blessed my life, and also that of my late father, as it was the only worship he was able to get to before he went home. Keep going, and God will lighten your way. Wow. Joel from Portadown.
Wow.
How about that? There you go.
That's
Helen, you can
so
have that
humbling.
as well, because you're doing exactly the same up in North London. Keep going. God will lighten your way.
Thank you.
You know? What a lovely finishing
Yeah,
text.
that's so nice. The touching lives are so important, Helen, and you're doing it in a very practical way. We try to do it in helping in different ways practically, but at the same time, we're here for people. Our office is open as well, and the testimonies that come in and the people's needs as well. I'll be able to stand with them in practical ways, but also in standing with them on in different situations that they go through. There's a scripture you want to finish with. It's brilliant.
Well, it's a scripture that Jesus picked right at the beginning of his ministry. It's almost his manifesto in these political days. And he picked it from Isaiah 61. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives, and to release from the darkness the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favour and the day of the vengeance of our God, and comfort for all who mourn. And then it goes on to say in verse 4, and I love this bit, and they will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated.
That's it. We're out of time, and you're not even going to get the outro because we're out of time. Goodbye.